Welcome, everyone, to the latest, this week's Lone Wolves Detroit Lions podcast. Here we are this week, this Thursday, the upcoming 2025 NFL Draft takes place from Green Bay. I'll be at Allen Park throughout the entire 3 days. Lions on SI is going to bring you wall-to-wall coverage of the draft, who's selected, any trades up, trades down, what the impact is going to be of the prospect that joins the Lions. It's going to be a fun time. Definitely now's the time for the Detroit Lions to really showcase what they're about. I really enjoyed the podcast that was done on the Lions website with the director of college scouting. You get a little bit of insight into how important it is for scouts to go be in person, to see these athletes, to see what the importance is of these top 30 visits. Christian and I are going to talk all about it, lessons learned, what we think is going to happen. But it's real interesting as we start. Before we talk about the draft, there's been some developments regarding, obviously, when a football team has so much talent. The draft is an opportunity for teams to really start to take shape with their roster and make key decisions. For the Detroit Lions, clearly the roster has a lot of high-end players that were drafted in the first couple years of the Brad Holmes regime. So now there's more speculation that Jameson Williams could be traded. And Sports Illustrated looked at it. Albert Breer, the NFL insider, the senior NFL insider for Sports Illustrated, took a look and said, okay, there's players like Kayvon Thibodeau of the Giants, Jameson Williams of the Lions. They're due fifth year options. And that could allow for NFL teams to kind of say, wait a minute, if you make a deal for one of those players, you could have them for the next 2 years under team control. So at first, it was speculation, but now you look at it and you say, you know what? Teams could call on Jameson Williams, but to me, I still would be shocked if the Lions were to part ways. I still expect the Lions by the May 1st deadline to exercise the fifth-year option, unless a deal, Christian, comes in that blows the Lions away with multiple picks. I just don't think that it's feasible for the Lions to trade Jameson Williams. What do you make of all the recent speculation? I understand why, because there has to be an odd man out, but I'm a little bit surprised that people think it's Jameson Williams with all the talent that he's got.
Yeah, he's very talented, and I think that where this is coming from is the fact that the Lions may not extend him long term, and if they're not going to extend him long term, then there's a lot more to be had if you were to trade him than if you were to just let him walk. And I think that when you look at the overall scape of things with the Lions and you look at all the different guys they have to pay, like with some of the off-field stuff and the injuries with Jameson Williams, then yeah, there's a legitimate argument to be had there. Do I think it happens this year? No, I do not. But what I do think could happen is I think they're going to pick up his option. And if they pick that option up, that gives them or a team they were to trade him to another year of team control. And I think that is a big factor in all this because let's face it, if the Lions hold on to him and you wait a year, 2 years down the line at the end of that fifth year and you look to trade him maybe at that deadline, depending on where you're at or whatever, the value may not be what it is right now. And so I think what some of this conversation is coming from is the fact that he's coming off of a very good year and he has had some off-field stuff that has limited him in the past. And so in some minds, his value may not get higher. It may feel like it's not going to get any higher than it is right now. And so that's where that argument's coming from, in my opinion, is that why not just trade him now while his value is at its peak if you think that he's going to regress in some fashion in 2025 and beyond. So I think that the whole Jameson Williams conversation is fascinating because he's a very good player. An underrated aspect of this is how much of a figure in the city of Detroit he has become and how involved he is in the community. And the fan base has really embraced him as well. So do I think it happens on draft day? No. And do I think this ends with a trade? Not necessarily. But he certainly is one worth watching throughout the rest of this offseason and into next.
So you look at it and you see the league. Obviously, what's great about the draft, there's so much time to assess which teams need quarterback, which teams need wide receivers, which team needs defense. Clearly, the Lions are on the side of leaning a little bit more toward needing defensive players, but still having some room to add offensive linemen for depth and to replace some of the aging vets. But which teams do you think, if a team at least inquires, wants to know, hey, the Detroit Lions have an opportunity to move on from a figure that is really popular. That's an asset. The reason why Jameson Williams is being brought up is not because he's a bad player or a bad person, is that we're looking at him as an asset. And in regards to the Lions, there are weaknesses in certain areas of the football team and in draft capital, which we'll talk about because there's speculation now. Some insiders have started to report some news that they're hearing, and we'll talk about that. But which teams do you think could come knocking for Jameson Williams?
Well, I'll give you a really fun one. I think the Dallas Cowboys could potentially be in the market to make a move like this. Look, there's no secret. Jerry Jones wants to win. His hands are all over the organization from a roster management standpoint, things of that nature. And they have CD Lamb. But aside from CD Lamb, they don't have that bona fide number 2 target. So why not, if you're Jerry Jones, why not try to go make a play for Jameson Williams? I'm not saying the Lions would do it, but I think that is a team that could be kind of in that market, so to speak. Dallas has some talent offensively, but they just paid a bunch of money to Dak Prescott, $60 million a year, I believe is that average annual value of contract. And because of that, you need to find talented players who are able to contribute on short-term, rookie-style contracts. Jameson Williams has 2 more years left on his rookie deal if the Lions pick up that 5th-year option. He has this year, and then he has 1 more. And I know that the 5th-year option is not going to be cheap, but it's relatively affordable for what the value is of the position of wide receiver. So I think that if you're the Cowboys, that's a team that could look to make this type of move on draft night. I think if they are serious about it, they're either going to draft a wide receiver, like if Ted McMillan gets it to 12, then I think Dallas is in play there. Matthew Golden is another name that we've seen sprinkled throughout the mock drafts at 12. But why not go get a guy who did it, got 1,000 yards last year, and is a threat to score every time he touches the ball? If I'm the Lions, I'm not giving up Jameson Williams this year. But I'm just saying that a team like Dallas could be somebody potentially interested.
Oh, Jerry Jones making a splash. That's real interesting to see. And look, again, I find it like really challenging because, especially, I've kind of viewed it through the lens of your biggest investment is Jared Goff, and he's making north of $50 million, and you're taking a big weapon away. But you look at it and you say, well, potentially the Lions could replace Jameson Williams with Matthew Golden, but it's not a direct replacement based
Correct.
on their skill sets. But you could find a big-bodied receiver like an Isaac Tesla down the road as well in the middle round. So there are avenues based on who's been brought in for meetings that you could say, well, maybe the Lions keep Jameson Williams this year and next, but the rub is that they don't end up giving him an extension, and he ends up being around for the Lions in 2025 and 2026, but that's it. So it's going to be very fascinating to see how it plays out. Again, I would be shocked if the Lions end up trading Jameson Williams. So now we look at some of the early draft buzz, and you're hearing very wise. It's just an age-old adage for the listeners out there. What moves the market in the draft are quarterbacks. And you realize, all right, most likely the number 1 pick is going to be a quarterback. The next decision maybe is going to be dependent on which teams like Shedeur Sanders. Many people are speculating maybe Shedeur ends up falling out of the first round completely. But there is a quarterback out of Louisville, I believe, that kind of is starting to make some waves. And with that said, there are some teams that still have other needs, like the Giants, that may end up taking Abdul Carter or a different position that may want to get back up into the first round. And that makes sense. That's where, you realize the Browns are interested in the quarterback. They're sitting there at the top of the second round. Teams around with the Browns are sitting with the 33rd pick. The Lions are sitting at 28. So this is the intro part where we discuss, you know what, there is an opportunity and a benefit now, and maybe a market. I wrote on Lions on SI that there's a reason that maybe Brad Holmes could add some significant capital, because where the Lions currently sit, and to set the table, because they're a good football team, and this is predicated on the fact they're a 15-win team, and because, like, you just look at it in the first round, the Lions are picking 28th. So in each round of the draft, they're picking lower and lower. So the Lions could look to add capital in higher spots in the second round, maybe higher than 60, maybe a spot between 30 and 60. Maybe in the third round, you find a spot a little bit higher than where you are. So the value of the Lions picks is not that great because they're a good football team. So how could you add to that? Maybe trading back, adding 1 or 2 more picks in this draft, maybe replenish. I think you don't have a pick in the 5th round, I believe, in this draft. So you have an opportunity there, or you could just move up in the rounds you're already in order to then maybe package those picks to maneuver around. you see what I'm saying in regards to using additional picks that you acquire in a trade to then package them to move up to get the guys that you want? So there is an argument to be made. And the point of all that is I could see the value of trading out of number 28. I could legitimately see it in a reasonable way, not just throwing it out there. I think a reasonable option because of how much first round picks cost and then tying to a 5th-year option. If you want to go lower on your salary cap and you think you have a cluster of players in the 2nd round that you can take, I like the idea of maybe peeking some phone calls to the Giants and Steelers and seeing if they want to get back in the 1st round.
Yeah, I think that those two teams that you just mentioned, along with Cleveland and New Orleans, I think are 4 teams. And then you can even maybe sprinkle in Las Vegas here at the top of the 2nd round. And so the thing to watch on draft night, where does Shedeur Sanders land? Because, in December, if you'd have asked me that question when he's wearing New York Giants cleats and prancing around New York, I think that there was a legitimate case that he was going to go number 3 overall. And if he goes number 3 overall, then this thing is off and running. Because then you talk about New Orleans at 9. Are they going to go quarterback? I think if Shedeur gets past New York and he falls to 9, does New Orleans look at him? And if New York and New Orleans both pass on Shedeur Sanders, then he could fall as far as 21 to Pittsburgh. And at that point, you have to start thinking, if you're a team that's outside the 1st round and you're Cleveland and you're New York, why would you not go back into that 1st round? Because the value of a 5th-year option with quarterbacks especially, that is huge. The 5th-year option on quarterbacks can be massive because it gives you an extra year team control where you're not going to, with the salary cap increase, by the time this class of rookies gets around to their 2nd contract, quarterbacks might be making $70 million a year. And because of that, if you're Cleveland and you're sitting at 33, why would you not try to bump up 3-4 spots, get into the 1st round, and get a guy that you can get on the 5th-year option? And it's funny the way that it all works out, but because of how valuable that is, I think the Lions will have a market on draft night for their 28th pick, especially if Sanders falls to 21 and now Jackson Dart is sitting there at 28. Dart and Tyler Show, and the people are all over the place on Jalen Milroe, but he's the most polished running quarterback we've seen in terms of his ability to run. And if he figures out the passing aspect of it, he's going to be dangerous. So those 3 guys are kind of all in that next pod. And so if a team like Cleveland says, hey, you know what? We want Jackson Dart. We know he's going to sit a year. Let's go get him on a 5th-year option, as opposed to waiting. And with you look at the trade value charts and all that stuff, the difference of moving up 5 spots is not going to break the bank. And so I think that Detroit will certainly have a market for whoever to come up and get a quarterback or an edge rusher or an offensive lineman. But I think if there's a guy at either of those positions, the Lions should just stick and pick them. But I do think that there's going to be an opportunity for them to add picks on draft night based on how that board shakes out. And again, you got to look out, where does Shedeur Sanders land? That's going to tell the whole story on the quarterback market.
And real fast before we start talking about the Lions, what do you make of the Louisville quarterback? There's been such speculation. Do you think he'll be a solid pick? Do you think he'll be a player? Because you look at it and you say, you know what, he seems like a 1st-round talent, but a lot of people look at it collectively and don't view this quarterback market all that great.
Yeah, I don't think this quarterback class is all that great. Listen, he's a good player, but I think that the age is a factor there. I believe he played in college 7 years, and he's had some injuries and stuff like that. You can heal, but doesn't ever really go away. That's just kind of my thoughts on it. I think that if he's in the right situation, he's going to succeed. And that's the thing about quarterbacks, is a lot of it is dependent on where you land. And if your situation is set up for you to succeed, then you're going to be just fine. But I'm not as bullish on him. I'm not as big of a Jackson Dart guy as some others are. I'm not a huge fan of Sanders. I think Ward has the chance to be pretty solid. And I think in the right situation, Sanders can thrive and Dart needs to develop a little bit, but I do think there's some upside there. But I'm just not really sold on this year's class as a whole.
All right. Now, the Detroit Lions, and I want to preface this by saying I respect everybody's opinion. And there are a huge amount of fans that want the Detroit Lions to select an edge rusher, a defensive end at number 28, or move up and find one of the impactful defensive ends, whether it be a Donovan Ezuraku, Mike Green, Shamar Stewart, James Pierce. There are a plethora of edge rushers out there that can get the job done. And I understand that the idea of waiting till the 2nd round, 3rd round could net you a good player, but maybe not one as impactful right away. And so to me, I understand the way in which fans would react. I understand that. I respect that because it's an important position. Rushing the quarterback and sacking and earning and being disruptive from the defensive line is key. And the Lions saw directly in the Super Bowl, the fans and the Lions themselves saw that when you have a disruptive defensive line chock full of talent all along the interior and the defensive ends, you can do some things. But for me, I'm kind of resigned that, all right, when the Lions say we don't draft for need, it opens the door for a different position. And I think there's one other position that they could target. And it's a big area of need. And it's still in an area where you can justify making that pick. So to me, you'll see my mock drafts come out this week that are going to involve an offensive lineman. I think that you look to the Blue Bloods, you look to the names that you see in the top ranked for the Detroit Lions. So the pick for me, if it's a dream pick, I would say that you trade up and you get the best edge rusher. But I think that one of the things I would say is that you have a great opportunity to land one of two offensive linemen that I think is great. So I'm going to give two. I'm going to cheat a little bit. And I think that if you land Gray Zabel or Tyler Booker, and it'll be one of those two in my final mock draft, I'm going to weigh it out, watch more film, and see how it plays out, whether Lions are aggressive. Stay tuned to Lions on SI. But the dream pick is a solid offensive lineman that can contribute right away. And I trust in Brad Holmes' evaluation with the scouts that there are. And I think in my mock draft, I have an edge rusher a little bit later in the draft. So I think Gray Zabel or Tyler Booker, and everybody can sleep well on night one, that you solidified a position that's going to help not only the running game, but quarterback Jared Goff. For you, Christian, who's the dream pick? If the Lions stay, maybe somebody that you think is really talented that you see from 20 to 25 that is really talented that could be there at number 28. Who's the dream for Christian?
Yeah, so I'm a little mad that you took one of mine. I think I'll just start with Gray Zabel. I think that his background as a tackle, right, and then everybody thinks he's going to be at his best if he slides inside to guard or center. I think that is the type of player the Lions need. Like, I think that his ability to come in, he's going to compete to start on day one at a guard position, which you're bringing back 4 of your 5 starters on the offensive line. The one you don't bring back plays right guard. So Zabel gives you an option there. Frank Ragnow is one of the best centers in the league when healthy, but he's been banged up, missed some time last year and the year before. He's one of the toughest players in the league, and he's not going to miss games when he can stand up and walk to the line of scrimmage, right? But, Father Time is undefeated, and we don't know how much longer we have of healthy Frank Ragnow. And in the event that he gets hurt, Zabel could potentially slide in and play center. Like, I know The Athletic has him rated as a center in this year's draft class. So I think that Gray Zabel's versatility would be awesome to just plug in with the Lions. And it's like, okay, go to training camp. We're going to play at guard, and we're just going to see where you stick. And he's a talented player. He's really, really good. I think he is an ideal option if you're going offensive line. In terms of other ones, in my final mock draft, I had the Lions selecting Michael Williams. With the way the edge position group is kind of situated and how deep it is he gonna for sure stamp it, make it to number 28? I don't know. When I was kind of doing my research and going through my process of my mock draft, he's kind of in that consensus tier of the 20 to 28. I think the Lions are his floor. He's physical, he's fast, he uses his hands really well. And I would love Michael Williams up opposite Aiden Hutchinson, just because when teams want to run away from Hutchinson, you're running right into that brick wall that Michael Williams creates with how well he defends the edge. And then one more defensive tackle, Derek Harmon. Harmon is a Michigan native, started at Michigan State, transferred to Oregon, had a really good year for the Ducks last year, can play multiple positions along the defensive line, and I think Harmon has the potential to be really special. And when you need a guy that's going to be ready to come in and play right away, right next to DJ Reader on that defensive line. We don't know about Aleem McNeil as far as the start of the season, so I think Harmon's a guy who could help you instantly. And on a roster where you don't have one clear cut, we don't have anybody at this position, let's go get somebody who's going to help us right away, and I think Derek Harmon can do that.
Nice selection. All right, so now you have a situation in which we've looked at the boards, we've looked at who's available, who's not, who's the pick. I obviously have to be reserved in my mock draft is coming out, but you know who you want, who's the best available, the best players. Michael Williams, in a report of Sports Illustrated, had a workout, but it didn't exactly go that well. He kind of was dealing with some nagging injury, but there's always something that tends to pop up pre-draft that could be reported to help maybe have them slide a little bit. But a lot of the players, which was wild to see starting from the combine, just didn't participate. It was interesting to see that Will Johnson still never ran a 40. We still don't know his top end speed from the workouts, but it's to me a situation in which I feel like the position is going to be offensive line. I feel like it's going to shake out based on my mock draft, offensive line first, maybe a defensive tackle, then a wide receiver, edge rusher in the later rounds on day 2 or day 3. I think there's enough depth. And then you fill spots at safety, linebacker, and maybe another offensive lineman, maybe later on when the later rounds. Between the 5th round guys to 7th round guys are going to struggle to make the team and even compete, but you still have to fill out your needs. And I think the first 4 picks, the first, picks in the 150 spots they have, I think will be really, really key to have some impact. But who do you think, Christian, at this point, who do you think the Lions will select at number 28 when I think the odds on favorite maybe is they stay up or maybe move up just a little bit, 22, 23, if they find that Tyler Booker's there, that they really want him and they feel like a Texans team might still take him, maybe move up just in front of them on the draft board. But who do you think, if they stay at number 28, they hand it in around 11:30 at night on a Thursday evening after the Pistons hopefully win game 3, who do the Lions pick? Who's the name that's get written on the card and the Lions hand it in for Roger Goodell to read on late Thursday evening?
For all the reasons I just mentioned, I'm going to go with Gray Zabel. I know I had Mikel Williams in my last mock draft, but when you really dig in, I think it's more likely that Zabel is there than Mikel Williams is there. Obviously, Williams would be a dream, but I think Zabel has a good chance of being there. He's kind of in that 2nd to 3rd range in terms of interior offensive line, and with an emphasis being on offensive tackles in terms of the overall offensive line, I think there's a good chance he could slide down the board to 28 for the Detroit Lions. And I think, like I said, Zabel is going to be a perfect fit for the Lions just because he's so versatile. He could slide in behind Ragnow if Ragnow has to miss a game. He's going to compete with Glasgow and Mahogany and the rest of the young offensive linemen for those 2 guard spots. You'd have to think Glasgow will at least have a chance to defend his left guard spot. But in the event Zabel beats him out, maybe you're rolling out there with Zabel and Mahogany. Who knows? I just think he adds another layer to your offensive line competition. He's going to give you a lot of different options on game day. And the best part is he's ready to help you right now. And that's what it's all about for a team that's looking to make the Super Bowl. So give me Gray Zabel. Mikel Williams is 2 on that list. And then Derek Harmon 3.
All right. Who should they avoid? Who's the player that you realize, okay, is maybe not a position of need, maybe too much of a luxury pick, too much of a risk? For me, it's Matthew Golden. Look, I know he's great. I know that he's a player that I think could be very much a valued piece, maybe even a 1st-round pick. But I think that you can find value later on in this draft at the wide receiver spot. There's some players that you've brought in and talked to. And Isaac Tesla, I believe, is a name that you're getting. And I'm curious your sense after reading my piece about how, the Lions do extensive research about James Pierce, Mike Green. They take it on a case-by-case scenario. Do you think that they should just be precluded? Or do you, say like a player like Shamar Stewart, who people say just didn't have enough productivity at the collegiate level to kind of justify a 1st-round spot? Is there a player at all? And it's always great doing podcasts with my other co-host, Adam, in that we'd always say, all right, is there a guy that's going to make you flip the camera and make you flip out? And he would always have a couple. And for a good stretch there in the mid 2000s, the Lions would hit on some of those guys, especially back in the day. If you guys remember, the Lions and their former GM got into a situation in which in the 1st round, they just had a string of wide receivers that they kept taking, and everybody would be left scratching their head. And it'd be like, you know what? It's probably post-traumatic stress for guys like me with the Roy Williams of the world and the Charles Rogers and the Mike Williams and the run of wide receivers. So I'm going to stick with the tradition of no wideouts, no offensive skill positions needed other than an offensive lineman. I think that Matthew Golden, luxury pick, not needed for the Lions at this time. Who should they avoid in your mind?
Yeah, so that's interesting. I think that the luxury pick, I would be almost in on a wide receiver, to be completely honest. I think that they would add another layer, but I'm in the 1st round, I'm not sold on it, but like I do think Golden's a good player and can help him out. Where I'm leaning away from is James Pierce out of Tennessee. I got to give credit. I love reading the Go Long publication with Tyler Dunn, and he works with Bob McGinn, who's a Hall of Fame reporter who does an excellent series every year on gets anonymous quotes from scouts and really does the research to tell the story of some of these prospects. And some of the things I read about James Pierce were not super encouraging in terms of just like his overall work ethic, and sometimes he would just be off by himself on the sidelines. And I'm not so certain that just fits the Lions. And there's no doubt James Pierce could end up being a really good player. But with the Lions' history and the kind of the trend they've set of we're going to draft guys who are going to come in and fit us right away, I just don't see that being an immediate fit. Now, the one way I could see the Lions doing it is if they feel strongly enough about their culture that they can start to take in players who maybe have these question marks on their scouting reports. So Pierce is one I'd probably stay away from. Of course, they say that and he'll probably go somewhere else and tear it up because he is a very good player. But yeah, I just think that some of these, in the margins where in a deep edge class where the thing that separates this guy from this guy is question marks about, is he a good teammate? Is he coachable? Like, because the class is so deep, I think the Lions can afford to stay away from players who have those questions, if that makes sense. So Pierce is one I'm leaning towards staying away from.
Yeah, no doubt. It's going to be interesting to see how the draft shakes out, not only for the Lions, and we'll talk at the end regarding how the draft could shake out for other teams that are rivals or just drafting a little bit lower than the Lions that are on the Lions schedule. But I'm curious, a fun aspect of the draft is that the league announced that Detroit Lions cornerback Terrion Arnold is going to make his way to Green Bay and be there on site to announce one of the Lions picks. I think it's going to be a day 2 pick. So it'll be a fun opportunity for the Lions' talented player to go out there in front of the Green Bay audience. And I think that, a guy like me just looks at it right away and goes, oh, this is great. What's he going to say? Does he take the opportunity to kind of remind? I would just keep it very simple and just remind the fans. I want to remind you guys that I represent the back-to-back NFC North division champions. You guys are looking at One Pride, a team that has dominated this division for the last couple years and will continue because we're drafting, boom, Josiah Stewart from University of Michigan, pick number 60. Would be great if you got a chance to do that in Green Bay. Would be a fun opportunity. Does Terrion Arnold take a chance to kind of go viral with his opportunity? I feel like he'll be professional because everybody's going to expect it, and you want to keep it. You don't want to rile up the Green Bay fans, but man, I love the Dallas, the opportunity that the Dallas have had when they've been in Philly to rile it up. There's been so many viral moments of teams that now they know, okay, we're speaking to a big national audience, and we're here taking the opportunity to troll a little bit. Can be fun. Do you think Terrion takes the opportunity, and should he?
Oh yeah. I definitely think he does it. I mean, when you listen to him talk, he just is so confident, right? That there's no way he doesn't get up there and just take at least a little bit of a jab. Maybe he goes and says the score of how badly they beat them when they beat them at Lambeau last year. Maybe he goes in there and he calls Green Bay the home of the Lions because they won there the last couple of years.
There you go.
Something like that. I'm just telling you, there's going to be something that he says. We saw it first when he was drafted by the Lions and the draft in Detroit. He comes up there, he owned the moment, right? He's a guy who's made for the cameras. He's a darn good football player too, but he's not going to shy away from his opportunity. I think he's going to get in there and get a jab in. We'll see if it's in the 2nd or 3rd round. I don't think that's been announced yet. But if it's in the 3rd round, it'll be, pick 102 is the last one of the 3rd one, so it'd be the last one of the night. So we'll see if they usher him off the stage quick, if that's the case. But I think if he gets up there in the 2nd round, it could get serious.
All right. Now, I wrote, and it's good that the supporters definitely are in touch. They know their mock drafts. But again, and I stood my ground in the defense. The one player that I don't want to see is running back Ashton Jeanty go to the Bears. I don't want to see it happen. I feel like he's a solid player. Many people believe that he's going to go 6 to the Raiders, but he could fall. And my response was, I respect everyone's opinion, but I do think that the Bears would be a much more potent offense with a great leader like Ben Johnson, who knows the game offensively, with a young quarterback and a young stud running back behind a revamped offensive line. I don't want to see that. And I do think that clearly the Bears want Jeanty to fall. But I look, when you look at the Bears, they got some capital. They got a lot of picks in the first 100. They could package some to move up to number 6. And I think if you love a player and you feel like they help you, I'm not so certain that the Bears are going to just sit back and be comfortable selecting where they are. They could move. So that's a player I don't want to see, because that would be a problem for the Lions, even though I know the Lions have a great defensive line. Interior. When Aleem McNeil does get healthy, they will be able to be stout against the run with currently Lopez and Aleem McNeil down the road, and DJ Reader. And hopefully, if Broderick Martin does develop, he'll be a big-bodied interior nose tackle that can help potentially do some things. So we'll see how that plays and how that shakes out with the defensive tackles and the interior, as well as the defensive ends and the linebackers that the Lions have. And then another player too, and the team that you're just going to have to watch because they're on your schedule. I don't want to see a significant pass rusher another one land with the Eagles. I just think that if Pierce falls there, that's going to raise some eyebrows. If you get a Dominic or a Donovan Ezuraku go there, or a player that falls like a Nick Scourton that maybe ends up going there, I don't want to see an impactful defender go to the Eagles. So clearly the picks of the Commanders, of the Bears, the division, as well as the Eagles are going to be definitely on my radar. But the one players I don't want to see Ashton Genty fall to the Chicago Bears. Who's the one player that you think could be hurt, that could hurt the Detroit Lions, especially if they land with an opponent that's on the 2025 schedule?
I have two, and they're both offensive guys. You mentioned the Bears. I think if Tyler Warren lands in Chicago, that's going to be a tough assignment for anybody, because we know how Ben Johnson used Sam Laporta. As a rookie, he had a massive year with the Lions. But I think when you look at Tyler Warren is a much more polished prospect than Sam Laporta was. He's one of the best tight end prospects to come through in recent years. Now you plug that in with Ben Johnson and his creativity on the offensive side of the ball, and tight ends have had a lot of success with Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator. Right before Hockenson got traded, he was having a really good year. Laporta's had two pretty solid years under Ben Johnson's guidance, and now Johnson's going to Chicago. And if he brings in Tyler Warren, who is one of the best, most versatile all-around prospects we've seen in a little while at the position, that could be scary. That could be really scary if he lands there. And the other one is Tet McMillan, because the Lions play such a heavy amount of press man coverage and this sort of thing defensively. Tet McMillan, with his size and his frame, could be a nightmare for a team that likes to play press coverage, because he's so physical, he's fast, and he's big, and he can go up and catch the ball in contested situations. So I think McMillan could cause a lot of problems for the Lions defense as well. But those are the two guys really that I'm keeping an eye on, saying, please don't go to the NFC North. Please don't go to the NFC North. Please.
All right. The draft. Make sure you follow Lions on SI. Keep us in the mix like you have since 2019. We'll be there covering the draft on an insider basis. We'll be at Allen Park to talk to Brad Holmes, the draft picks right away, and we'll have in-depth coverage, highlights, learning about the pick, what they're going to bring to the position that they're in, and wall-to-wall from Thursday all the way to Sunday. We'll have a comprehensive look at the Detroit Lions draft, where it shakes out, how it impacts the roster going forward, new depth charts, everything that you want, videos, podcasts. We're going to bring it all over the next week. And we thank you for your continued support. It's a fun week, and now it's here. It's an important draft for the Detroit Lions to restock some of the talent that now you realize, all right, you can't keep two safeties at the highest price. You can't keep two linebackers at the highest price. So there's going to be some now, the next wave. And this is great because we'll now have a little bit more insight into, yes, Brad Holmes can build a team. And we've learned some insights into how they built the team. And we've learned how the scouts look at it and how the collective unit is all working as one to identify talent. But now the next step is, can you sustain success? Can you, when you're drafting not 1 through 8, when you're drafting 28th in every single round, how adept are you when the challenge is much greater? And so far, Brad has passed the early tests. Let's see how he does getting value picks and the moves that he makes in the 2025 NFL draft. I think one in which we'll learn in the coming years how this football team is either going to sustain success or start to fall off. And let's hope for the opportunity that this football team can get even closer to meeting their goal of winning a Super Bowl, and also their other goal that they keep stating publicly of sustained success. Thanks, everybody. Message us at Detroit Podcast if you have any commentary. If the Jameson Williams talk is just too much for you, let us know. Message, and we'll have some civil discourse regarding everything going on with the Detroit Lions. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in to the latest Detroit Lions Lone Wolves podcast. We'll bring you more later this week.